Hello, 8th graders, and welcome back to another lesson of Purpose Confirmation. We're so glad you're here. We hope you had an awesome Thanksgiving and that you're gearing up for Advent and Christmas just like we are, and we're excited to dive back into where we were. So last time, Father Andrew spoke to us about who Jesus was while he was ministering here on earth, right? He was a teacher and a preacher, and he was a healer and an exorcist, healing the blind and exorcising demons and all these things, right? All these miracles that Jesus performed. Well, in this lesson, we're speaking about who Jesus was, specifically in light of his passion, death, and resurrection. How those three events, his passion, death, and resurrection, came to change things, came to make all things new. So let's dive in. Okay, so when I think about the best news I've ever received, I go back to Father's Day of 2019. I was here at my parents' house, upstairs in my sister's bedroom, because all of my siblings were over for Father's Day. And my sister, for whatever reason, she's older than me, she was lying on her bed sick. It wasn't her bedroom anymore. And I was like, what are you doing up here? Go downstairs, be with Dad. And she was writhing in pain. And so my other sister comes up and we're all like, what's going on with Michelle? What's happening? And we find out, much to her chagrin, that she's pregnant, right? And this was the best news we could have ever received in that time period. And she was trying to surprise us for Father's Day. She had this cute little best grandpa outfit for my dad to tell our family that she was pregnant, but she was so sick that she couldn't keep the secret anymore. And this was the best news we'd ever received. Why? Not because my sister was sick, not because she was suffering. We're not crazy like that. We don't want to watch her suffer. But because we knew that this news was going to change everything within our family, that nothing was going to be the same. A new life was being created within her, right? And this was the best news. And so when we think about the good news of Jesus Christ, it doesn't just mean that Jesus died and we're watching him suffer and that's good news. No, that's crazy. What it means is that the good news of Jesus changes everything. And this is what his apostles, his disciples, the men that he was friends with, while here present on earth in his earthly ministry, this is the exact thing that they began to proclaim after his passion, death, and resurrection. That this is truly good news, that it will change your lives. And so in order to understand why that's necessary, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, which we'll get to, okay? We'll get to that in this video. But good news, what does the word good news come from? It comes from the word gospel. That's what we hear. The gospel is good news, right? They're synonymous. But this word gospel, the way we think about it, sort of happy and fluffy and all the things that we love to hear, the word gospel actually meant sort of a Roman decree when it was first used during the time of Jesus. It was, if you can imagine two warring parties, say Father Andrew and I are duking it out, right? And you all are under Father Andrew's tyrannical rule. You all are subject to his brutality, and he's just a really oppressive ruler, an oppressive king, right? And so I come in as a merciful leader, let's say. I come in and say, this has to stop, right? And so my army fights his army, battle it out, whatever the case looks like, and I win, okay? I'm victorious. A gospel message was something that would have gone out to all of you, to all of the subjects, to all of the people who are living under our rule, saying that there's someone new in town, that something new is about to happen because a victory has been won. And so too, the good news of Jesus is a proclamation that there's somebody new in town, that we no longer have to be slaves under the thumb of sin and death, but that he has freed us from that. And it means that we are invited into a relationship with him to live our lives differently because of it. And so in order to understand exactly what they meant, these disciples of his, proclaiming the good news, we have to go back to the beginning, okay? Back to Exodus. Okay, so the story of the Exodus, what do we have? We have Israel, God's chosen people, who are enslaved under Pharaoh in Egypt. They're enslaved in Egypt, and God is saying, I want to set my people free. Right? The Israelites, my chosen people. And so he taps Moses. He says, Moses, I need you to be the leader of this nation right now, and I need you to free my people, okay? And so Moses, this great man, goes to Pharaoh under the direction of God and says, listen, you're going to let the Israelites go, okay? Okay, cool. Check you later. See ya, right? And Pharaoh, what does he say? No. Get out of here. This is free labor. These are my slaves. You cannot have them. They're not going to leave. I'm not just going to let them go. You're bonkers, okay? You're crazy. But Moses is insistent because God is insistent. And he says, I want to free my people of this enslavement, right? I'm going to free them. And so what happens? We have the story of the 10 plagues, right? And we have things like frogs and lice and boils, locusts, right? All in an attempt to try to convince Pharaoh that the Israelite God is the God of the world, that he has reign over everything, that he can destroy whatever he desires to destroy. And Pharaoh is not budging, okay? And so the final plague, the last plague, is the massacre of the firstborn son, the killing, the death of the firstborn son, okay? And so God says to Moses, tell Pharaoh that this is going to be what happens next, that death will come upon every firstborn son in the land unless you let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no, you're crazy, right? But in order to protect God's chosen people, the Israelites, from this death of the firstborn son, God says, this is what I want you to do, okay? I want you to take an unblemished lamb. And this is so important, okay? Because it points to something in the New Testament. I want you to take an unblemished lamb. And with the blood of that unblemished lamb, I want you to take lentil, a plant of sorts, and put it over your doorstep, okay? And have a meal with your family. And whoever's door has this blood of the unblemished lamb over it, I'm going to pass over that house in honor of the covenant between me and my people, and I will spare your son, okay? And so those who listen, God's chosen people, the Israelites who listen to this, their sons are spared. But death comes and takes the sons of the families whose doors did not have this blood over them, right? Including the king of Egypt, including Pharaoh. And so after this, Pharaoh is distraught and he says, get out of here with you and your crazy God. I want nothing to do with it anymore. Just go, okay? Go. And so that's the Exodus. They're exiting out of Egypt. They're leaving, right? God's chosen people are free from enslavement to Egypt, okay? But what happens? This Passover, this moment in history for the Israelite people, who then become the Jewish people, who Jesus himself was a Jew, right? The Jews would celebrate this event in history for their people, this freedom from slavery. They would celebrate it with a Passover meal, okay? And they would have unleavened bread and wine and all the things and family, and they would say the prayers in honor of this event in history. And so Jesus himself celebrated this Passover. He celebrated it in commemoration of what Moses brought to the people through God, right? But Jesus did something different. At his Passover meal, he did something completely different. The cup that was supposed to be drank in commemoration of this blood, he said, I will not drink of it until I am in heaven with my Father, until we are united as one, right? Which was not always the case. It was never the case. You would always finish the meal. You would always consume it. And he said, I will not drink of this until it's finished for me. And the very next day, during his crucifixion, when he is about to die on the cross, he says the words, I thirst. I thirst. And what is he given? Hyssop, which is a cheap wine, okay? And he drinks cheap wine, and upon drinking this wine, he says, it is finished. That the covenant that God established with his people from the very beginning to free them from slavery is finished. And Moses himself, the story of Exodus is sort of a precursor to who Jesus was. And so do we see the parallels? So Moses in the Exodus, he says to the people, sacrifice an unblemished lamb and drink wine and have unleavened bread, and you will be freed from Egypt because our God is faithful, right? You will be freed from slavery under Pharaoh. But with Jesus, he himself is the unblemished lamb. And with his body and his blood at the Last Supper, he allows us as his disciples to partake in his sacrifice, in that last Passover meal, right? And he's saying, I'm not just going to free you from slavery under a ruler like Egypt, but I'm freeing you from eternal death. I'm freeing you from sin and death. And that through me, you can have new life, right? Okay, so this is huge news. This is a game changer. This is what changed everything. His very passion, death, and resurrection, which bought for us eternal life, right? Should we so choose it. Because looking at the world, what can we tell? We can tell that, okay, even if this is true, what happens? Just in the brokenness of the world, we can tell that we're still sinful, that you and I still wake up in the morning and oftentimes choose ourselves rather than Jesus, rather than living in this freedom, right? But through his passion, death, and resurrection, we have been redeemed. When I say that word redeemed, I mean that the price for our sin has been paid, that death no longer has the victory, that there's a new gospel message, a new decree coming out, that we don't have to live under the yoke of sin and shame anymore, should we so choose it. And so that's my question for you all today. In the light of this good news, in the light of the passion and death and resurrection of Jesus, how will you choose to live? We'll see you next time.